Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. This is a rephrased account based on the official courtroom testimony from the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as documented by Inner City Press. Day 12 of the trial was expected to be routine. Standard filings, procedural updates, the usual pace. But everything changed when Eddie Murphy quietly entered through a side door. Reporters snapped to attention. The jury leaned forward. Diddy sat frozen. No one knew Eddie would testify. Not the press, not even most of the legal teams present. What he said under oath would ripple far beyond the courtroom. "I've kept quiet for decades," Eddie began. "But after what I saw, I had to walk away from Hollywood, and I've carried that weight with me ever since." He sat poised in the witness chair, his suit crisp, voice steady. But his eyes held the burden of something much older than Hollywood. When the judge asked him to state his name, he did so plainly, then glanced at Diddy, sitting still at the defense table. Adjusting the mic, Eddie said what no one expected. "I left Hollywood because I saw too much. And once you see it, you can't unsee it." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room fell silent, hanging on his every word. He recounted a night in 2006, during a career upswing, offers flowing, studio deals lining up, Oscar buzz building. "I was hot again," he said. The phone rang nonstop. I was being courted like it was the 80s all over again. Then came a phone call from a powerful producer. A quiet invite to a gathering in the Hollywood Hills. No schedule, no agenda, Eddie recalled. Just one of those parties where futures are built and loyalties are traded. Curious but cautious, Eddie agreed to attend. These events were legendary in Hollywood. Whispers of Diddy's exclusive parties where phones were confiscated, cameras forbidden, and guests told to just relax and be themselves. Eddie assumed it would be the usual, music, drinks, industry egos on parade. But the moment he pulled up, he sensed something was off. The house was a fortress, gated, guarded, access granted only after biometric scans. Valets in identical black suits took his phone and handed him a small card. It read, "Only one rule tonight, be who you really are." Inside, the mood was unsettling. Not loud, not festive. It was quiet, too quiet, like a church, but not sacred, more haunted. In the main lounge, Eddie scanned the space. Familiar faces filled the room, actors, producers, athletes. Some he knew, some he didn't expect to see there. All of them acted strange, not drunk or rowdy, just measured, controlled, as if they knew eyes were on them. Then, a woman in heels and a man in a robe walked past him toward a hallway. No words, just eerie silence. "That's when it hit me," Eddie told the court. "This wasn't about partying. This was about power." When asked why he didn't leave, Eddie paused. "Because I needed to understand. I needed to see. And God forgive me, I did." Moments later, Diddy approached him. "Like we were old friends," Eddie recalled. He wrapped an arm around Eddie's shoulder and said, "Brother, it's about time you came home." Eddie smiled faintly as he remembered. Then the smile faded. He didn't mean Hollywood. He meant this. Eddie described Diddy's demeanor, relaxed, self-assured, but with something cold behind his eyes. As they walked through the house together, Diddy gestured toward different guests, whispering eerie things like, "That one just financed a $200 million picture." Or, "He eats out of my hand now." The most chilling moment, though, came when they stopped outside a large woodenly door. Diddy turned, looked Eddie straight in the eyes, and said, "This is where the choices get made. You want to stay funny and broke, or—" And he didn't need to finish the sentence. The meaning was clear. Eddie looked away as he spoke, the courtroom still in complete silence, everyone realizing. This wasn't a party. This was initiation. "Want to level up?" Eddie said he tried to laugh it off, assuming it was some kind of elaborate Hollywood joke. But Diddy didn't laugh. He just stared, waiting for an answer. At that point, Murphy noticed something else inside the room. Just barely visible through a crack in the door was a camera tripod. Not hidden, out in the open. "I saw people go in that room looking nervous. I saw them come out either grinning like they won the lottery or looking hollow." Eddie didn't step in. Instead, he backed away, pretending he needed a drink. Diddy smiled again and said, "No rush. We're all family here." Then he disappeared down a hallway. That moment was the first real warning sign, Eddie said, the line in the sand. It stopped being a party and started feeling like an initiation. He walked outside briefly to clear his head, but a woman at the exit stopped him. "You're not done yet, are you?" she asked, handing him a drink. "Nobody leaves before the experience." That phrase, the experience, kept ringing in his head. Murphy re-entered the main lounge, and what he saw next confirmed everything he feared. Eddie steadied his voice as he recalled the moment he saw something that would stay with him forever. They took a group of us into a back room. The lights were dim. Music was gone. There were velvet drapes, candles, and a long table with nothing but silver trays on top. He was ushered in alongside several A-list celebrities, including a rising action star whose name he hesitated to mention. But when pressed by the prosecutor, he confirmed Dwayne Johnson. The room fell into a heavy silence. Diddy was standing at the head of the table, smiling like he was hosting a dinner theater. "Tonight's about how far you'll go," he said to the room. "Because greatness doesn't come cheap. Y'all want to run Hollywood? Show me." A tray was placed in front of Dwayne Johnson, covered polished. A man wearing gloves pulled the lid off. Beneath it, raw monkey brains. Still pink. Still steaming. Some in the room laughed awkwardly. A few looked away. But Diddy said, "Come on, Rock. You eat that, the roll is yours." Eddie's voice cracked slightly as he recounted what happened next. Dwayne hesitated, looked around, then he did it. Just swallowed and kept going. Diddy clapped like a proud father. "That's what I'm talking about," he said, before looking down the line of guests. "Who's next?" Eddie said he froze. I felt sick. I looked for the door. But then Diddy did. He walked over and stood in front of me. He stared Murphy down and said, "You ready, preacher boy?" Murphy replied, "I didn't come here for this." Diddy leaned in and whispered, "Then why are you here?" The court sat in stunned silence as Eddie described walking out of that room. Not running, but with purpose. "I wasn't scared of what they'd do to me," he said. "I was scared of what they could do to others." As he left, Diddy shouted, "You'll be back when you're ready to really make it." Eddie never returned. He also never worked in Hollywood the same way again. "I told him I was a man of God," Eddie said, slowly adjusting his posture in the witness chair. "And I meant it. I told him I wasn't going to participate. I wasn't going to eat anything. I wasn't going to sign anything. And I sure wasn't going to lose my soul to fit into whatever circle that was." He paused, looking toward the jury. And that's when Diddy made it known, if you don't play the game plays you. Murphy recounted that after he turned down Diddy's invitation to participate in the so-called experience, he became a target. Not physically, but symbolically. "The way he laughed at me," Eddie said, shaking his head. He turned to the room and said, "Look at this church boy. He thinks faith is going to book him a franchise." The room erupted in laughter, forced laughter, nervous laughter. But it was enough. "I wasn't embarrassed," Eddie said. "I was disgusted. I realized that the party wasn't about testing who was loyal. It was about finding out who was desperate." Eddie testified that after leaving the mansion that night, he knew something would shift. "I didn't just walk out of a party, I walked out of Hollywood's inner chamber. The part nobody talks about, the one behind the velvet rope where favors are traded for silence and humiliation as currency." Over the next few months, things started to change. Projects that had been greenlit were suddenly shelved. Roles that had been written for him were recast. His agent of 7 years stopped returning calls. One producer who'd previously praised his work reportedly told a colleague, "He's not aligned anymore." Eddie looked straight ahead as he continued. "Aligned with what exactly?" "That's what I kept asking. Aligned with Diddy? Aligned with monkey brains and candlelit rituals?" He wasn't angry as he spoke. He was measured, controlled. But there was no mistaking the undercurrent of grief. "They didn't need to fire me. They didn't need to cancel me. They just needed to not call me. That's how the real blacklist works. You don't hear a gunshot, just silence." Murphy said he tried for a while to stay active. He wrote scripts, pitched new ideas, did voiceover work. But he felt a barrier he couldn't name. People smiled in meetings, said all the right things, but nothing happened. Nothing stuck. "It's like I was floating just outside the gates." He finished the segment with one last line that hit the courtroom with a thud. "You don't have to sell your soul in Hollywood, but if you don't, they'll convince everyone that you never had one to begin with." When asked directly if he believed he was blacklisted, Eddie Murphy didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, and not in a dramatic, headline-grabbing way. In the quietest, most precise way possible. That's how the machine does it, with whispers, not warnings. He elaborated on how the system works. There's no memo that goes out, no studio head saying, "Ban this person." But there are dinners. There are calls. There are little meetings behind frosted glass where someone says, "He's a liability now." Eddie explained that after the party, his name became toxic in rooms he'd previously owned. One high-ranking executive even told a friend of his, Eddie didn't pass the test. When the friend asked what that meant, the exec simply said, he said no when he was supposed to say yes. Murphy took a deep breath before continuing. That was all it took. One number one refusal. And the doors don't slam, they just don't open anymore. He recalled that over the next few years, his team began shrinking. Producers who once called him a surefire box office bet began distancing themselves. Studios that had begged him for meetings now cited budget constraints, or said they were going in a different direction. I watched the work disappear in slow motion, he said. I'd submit pitches and get no reply. I'd meet with networks and they'd nod through the whole meeting, and then ghost me. He added, you start to question yourself. You start to think maybe it's just timing, maybe it's the market. But then you hear the whispers, the things they say behind closed doors. The prosecution presented emails from a studio executive where Eddie's name was listed next to the words, not aligned. Pass. The judge allowed the exhibit. Murphy leaned toward the mic. I want the court to understand something. Hollywood's blacklist doesn't wear a name tag. It wears a smile, and it shakes your hand while it erases you. He testified that his refusal to participate in the party rituals, and worse, his decision to walk out, made him appear difficult and ungrateful in the eyes of the machine. I was labeled, he said, not for causing harm, but for refusing to be harmed. And then he hit a deeper nerve. There are people whose careers vanished because they turned down the same parties, because they saw what I saw and didn't want to play along. And we act like it's coincidence. It's not. Eddie ended the section with a solemn truth. Hollywood doesn't just make movies, it makes myths. And the biggest myth of all is that success is about talent. It's not. It's about compliance. Then Eddie dropped the most damning segment of his testimony so far. One that sent gasps through the gallery and caused the defense to immediately call for a sidebar. There's a list, Eddie said, an unwritten one. Everyone in the industry knows about it. It's the people you don't criticize, the ones you don't question. Because if you do, you're gone. The courtroom tensed. The judge warned him to avoid conjecture. Eddie nodded. I'm not speculating, Your Honor. I lived it. He continued. Diddy's on that list. Tyler Perry's on that list. Oprah Winfrey, she helped write it. The jury shifted in their seats. Reporters furiously typed. Eddie explained that this so-called list wasn't a document. It was a boundary, invisible but enforced with terrifying precision. Once you speak against someone on that list, your name gets passed around in whispers. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you talked, he said. This is how Diddy stayed untouchable for so long. It wasn't just his lawyers. It wasn't just his money. It was the fear of what it would mean to speak his name in a negative light. Murphy claimed that even people who didn't attend the parties still protected Diddy because they'd built their careers on his goodwill. Tyler Perry knew, Eddie said. So did others. And they didn't have to participate in the darkness. They just had to look away. The prosecution asked Eddie if he ever spoke to anyone about the list. He nodded. A fellow actor told me, "You're crossing the line, man. They don't come back for people who cross it." Murphy didn't say who that actor was, but he hinted they were once a close friend. We haven't spoken since, he said. That's the price. You speak the truth, you lose your circle. The judge permitted Murphy to submit a collection of emails, text messages, and dated call logs showing a clear change in tone from major contacts after the infamous party. They don't tell you they're cutting you off, Eddie explained. They just stop replying. Your name goes from must-have to not now. And then came the most damning statement of the day. You think Diddy blackballed people alone? He had help. He had protection. He had a whole damn network. He looked at the jury and said, this isn't just about what happened in that house. It's about how many people kept it quiet. How many signed checks to make it go away. How many built empires while the rest of us disappeared. After recounting the destruction of his career, Eddie Murphy shifted into quieter territory. The courtroom listened closely as his tone changed. Less about facts, more about feeling. The prosecution asked how these experiences affected him personally. Eddie stared ahead for a long second, then answered, It broke me. Not all at once, but little by little. A career doesn't vanish overnight, it dissolves. And the more I tried to pretend I was okay, the more it ate me alive. He admitted he didn't talk to anyone about what happened. Not even his closest friends. Because nobody would believe me, he said. And worse, if they did believe me, they'd be next. He described long periods of silence in his life. There were days where I didn't leave the house. I'd sit in the same chair replaying that night. Not because of what was done to me, but because of what I saw done to others. The fear in their faces. The fake smiles. The people who thought they had no choice. Eddie began to lean on his family more than ever before. My kids saved me. I'd hear them laughing in another room, and it would bring me back. Remind me of what was real, what mattered. He also leaned into faith, not as a publicity tool but as a lifeline. I stopped asking God why. I started asking him when. When was I going to speak? When was the world going to listen? When would truth mean more than money? The courtroom was utterly still. Eddie revealed he sought therapy, spiritual counseling too. He needed someone to help him process the guilt of walking away while others stayed behind. I kept wondering, should I have done more? Should I have pulled someone out of that house with me? He paused, looked at Diddy. But I realize now, the most dangerous thing I could have done was stay silent. And I stayed silent for too long. The prosecution asked why he never wrote a book or did an exposé interview. Eddie smiled bitterly, because the people who own the microphones are the same people who own the secrets. He ended the section on a deeply human note. I lost the spotlight, but I found my peace. And honestly, that was the first real role I ever played. A man finally free of the lie. The prosecutor approached slowly. Mr. Murphy, why now? Why speak today after all this time? Eddie exhaled. The question hung in the air like smoke. Because the walls are finally falling, he said. For the first time, I'm not the only one saying it. For the first time, the world is listening. He said when he saw Cassie Ventura take the stand, when he heard her voice crack as she described the horrors she endured, something inside him shifted. Then came Monique testifying, with receipts, transcripts, and years of pain wrapped into one quiet, firm voice. Then came the resurfaced Prince recording, a man-long dead warning about things no one wanted to hear when he was alive. I realized I couldn't sit this one out, Eddie said. Not again. Not while the blood was still wet on the floor. He said for years, fear held him back. Not just fear of losing work, but fear of retaliation, fear that his truth would be distorted. I saw what happened to people who spoke out. They weren't just canceled, they were erased. But now the silence had been cracked wide open. The trial had changed everything. There's a domino effect happening here, Eddie told the jury. And I'd rather be the next one to fall for the truth than sit on the sidelines protecting a lie. He described watching Diddy scream in court, watching the defenses crumble, watching public opinion shift. Not because of headlines, but because of what was finally being said under oath. I don't need a book deal. I don't need redemption. I need peace. And peace only comes when the truth is louder than the lie. He added that his children were older now, and that they asked him recently why he stopped acting. And I couldn't look them in the eye and say because I got tired, because that wasn't true. I stopped because I wasn't willing to lose myself to gain a career. He looked at the jury. I'm not doing this to bring Diddy down. I'm doing this so nobody ever has to be built up by him again. The judge called for a brief recess, and as Eddie stood, dozens in the courtroom rose with him. Not out of protocol, but out of something else, respect. When court resumed, the air was different, heavier, more focused. Everyone could sense that Eddie's time on the stand was nearing its end. But nobody could have predicted how he'd finish it. The prosecutor asked one last question. In your opinion, Mr. Murphy, what's the most important thing the jury and the public should take from your testimony today? Eddie took a long pause, then leaned into the mic. That Hollywood doesn't run on talent. It runs on submission. You could hear a pin drop. Eddie elaborated. It rewards obedience, not integrity. And the minute you stop nodding, stop pretending, you find yourself on the outside looking in. He said, what happened at Diddy's parties wasn't some isolated pocket of chaos. It was a system, a well-oiled, intentionally hidden engine that ran on fear, favors, and forced silence. I saw good people turn into puppets. I saw grown men eat monkey brains just to get on a casting sheet. And the ones who laughed the loudest, they were the ones pulling the strings. He then stared down the defense table. This man didn't build an empire. He built a trap. And too many of us walked right into it thinking we were climbing stairs. Eddie looked back at the jury. I could have said something sooner. I should have. But I'm saying it now. Because what's done in the dark is coming to light. And y'all are the first ones to see it without blinking. Then came the line that made headlines before the court session was even over. Don't protect the pretty lie. Let the truth be ugly. He stood up. The judge thanked him. The courtroom silent. Diddy, now visibly shaken, had nothing to say. Eddie Murphy, once the biggest star in comedy, had just delivered the most serious testimony of his life. And in doing so, he may have changed everything.